We did it. I can't believe this happened still, but I completed my first ever Ironman 70.3, and I am geared to the max. I feel pretty cool now. It's so much so that I've still got my wristband on. Now, the race, as you might assume, just happened. It was a week ago. And I'm still wearing the wristband in hopes that people stop me and are like, hey, did you do an Ironman? Right? And then my family comes up and they're like, take that thing off. It was 7 days ago. Just give this to me. I'll take it off tonight. But I want to make this video before I did. So I thought I'd give you guys a race day recap a week later. With my thoughts and challenges experienced on the course, because Oceanside was a tricky course, but also looking at what I would change and how I would improve my time, but also reduce my risk of injury, because I got hurt pretty bad, and that cut my time up a bit as well. So I'm just going to walk through kind of the steps of the race, my experiences in that as a type 1 diabetic as well. So that made it extra complicated, a little extra difficult, but nothing that I couldn't do. And was pleasantly surprised that blood sugars actually cooperated for the most part as I was balancing my insulin dosing and all that. Now, going into the swim, first off, I watched like 50 of these race recaps from the previous years at Oceanside, and everybody warns you that on the swim, you're going to be looking directly into the sunrise. And I was like, yeah, that can't be that big of a deal. I have slightly tinted goggles. I'll be fine. You can't see anything at all. It was incredibly frustrating. I looked at my watch afterwards, and the swim's obviously a 1.2 mile swim. I ended up swimming an extra quarter mile, zigzagging. So I got 1.45 or something like that. So that was frustrating. You will be blinded by the light. And I was yelling at lifeguards along the way, am I going the right direction? And they're like, just keep going. I'm like, okay. So the swim was difficult for that, but I had a unique experience that many other racers did not have to endure, thankfully. And that is that 5 strokes into the swim at the beginning, my goggles broke. My left goggle filled with water instantaneously, and for the duration of the race, every 5 to 10 strokes, I would have to stop, drain the goggle, stuff it back on my face. There were a few times I got kicked in the face from other racers, unintentionally, of course, and it would suction it back on. I was like, oh, thank you. But my goggles malfunctioned. That was super frustrating, but halfway through, I just kind of accepted that I was not going to be able to see anything. And that was the second half of the race. It was not seeing anything in the water and then not seeing anything above the water because of the sunshine. Now, the race was pretty choppy. We had a storm come through the night before, so they canceled the ocean section of the swim. So you're supposed to swim out in the ocean, curve around the harbor, and come back in. They shifted it over to a harbor-only swim, but we still made our way close to the ocean as it was an entrance from the harbor to the ocean. So we still got some of the chop and could feel the swell a bit going up and down through the waves, and I swallowed a ton of water. So that was a big bummer as well. Now, during the swim, there was a really unfortunate event that I didn't know happened until I got to the run segment of the half Ironman. And that is that my wedding ring, not this one, my actual wedding ring, came off and is likely now sitting in the bottom of Oceanside Harbor. So that was really frustrating. The whole duration of the run, I'm hoping that I'm going to find my ring back in transition after the race. I did not. This is a $20 ring I found on Amazon, so it's a placeholder for now, but that was a big bummer. So one of the big things I would change is to not wear jewelry as you're going out into the freezing ocean and your fingers are a lot smaller when things are cold. So goggles broke, water spout got kicked all over the place, and one of the big pieces that affected me in transition 1 is I didn't pre-mix my drinks, my sugar drinks. As a diabetic, I have to consume a lot more sugar and be really on top of how many grams of sugar and all this stuff. Thankfully, as a nutritionist, I also have this knowledge, so I know how to calculate it, but I didn't pre-mix my dextrose drinks, my electrolytes. And so as I'm trying to mix it, my hands were shaking so violently because of how cold I was that I was spilling, and it took me a lot longer than it needed to. So transition 1, incredibly slow for me. That was a bit of a frustration. I could not stop shaking. So getting dressed, getting my bag together, getting my drinks mixed up, could not stop shaking until about 5 minutes into the bike ride when I finally started to warm up again. Now, after the swim, we get into the bike ride, and there's another piece that I saw in a lot of other race recaps that I want to reiterate, and that is that Oceanside is a pretty darn hilly course. And I knew that going into this, so I did train hills a lot. I actually live in San Diego, and San Diego is also pretty hilly. We've got a few different rides that offer, 3,000 to 4,000 feet of elevation gain around in the city. So I just hit those every single week. And training hills made the hills in Oceanside much more doable. There's a number of people that had to get off their bike and walk the hills. Proud to say, I did not get off my bike to walk the hills, not once. In fact, on the hills, I found that as my recovery period. So I just dropped it into a gear that felt right and just kind of cruised up the hill. Didn't push too hard because I knew on the flats I'd be pushing a lot harder trying to catch up and make up time there. But on the hill, to me at least, it seems that the extra effort that would go into making the hill fast would be not as efficient as it would be if I were on a flat surface. So use my speed in the flats, use the hills as a recovery, and found that worked out pretty well for me. Now, there were a ton of people that got flat tires, most I've ever seen ever. Easily 50 to 100 people that I saw on the sides just changing tires. A number of them had crashed because of a flat, but most of them were just sitting on the side of the road fixing flats and losing a lot of their time. So I packed 2 spare tires, 2 cartridges, my levers and everything, and made sure I was ready for that, but thankfully did not experience a flat. I've actually never had a flat, knock on wood. But that was surprising to see so many people fixing flats. And I had heard about this as well, previous race cap videos, that the roads there are pretty chopped up. A lot of cracks that you can get your tires caught on, a lot of rocks, a lot of debris. And it wasn't terrible, but with how many people I saw with flat tires, I'd say it was bad enough that you might want to consider bringing at least 2 spares, tucking them somewhere in. So I have a seat saddle and tucked them both underneath that seat saddle, and it helped me out. On that note, aid stations were every 15 miles. So you've got 3 to 4 aid stations, which was enough, but it still felt like there was a lot of room in between them. And I wear a backpack when I race because I've got all my diabetes supplies in there for type 1 diabetes. My insulin, my sugar, spare supplies, all that kind of stuff. And I found that I had enough sugar because I could consume whatever I needed to, but there were a number of people that got to aid stations and stopped completely so they could drink a whole bottle of Gatorade, have a whole Martin gel, a whole granola bar, right? Like they had been waiting for this, like they were starving. So what I would suggest that people who don't wear backpacks into the race is to have the supplies you need, stuff it in your racing bib, your shorts, your bike cages, find ways to keep enough sugar on you and carbs, fast-acting fuels to get you through the race because for me, this was one of the longer distances. I'm used to about 60 miles, but 56 miles after a swim, pretty tiring. You get hungry. So that's a big part. Pack enough sugar. Train hills if you're going to race Oceanside. Those hills would have been the death of me had I not been prepared for them. So those hills were something pretty serious to take care of. Watch speed limits. So Oceanside, I heard about this a few times, thankfully, but there's a few sections. There's one main section, but I could have sworn I saw 2 or 3 where they have 25-mile-an-hour speed limits on cyclists. And if you go over 25 miles an hour, they will disqualify you. No questions asked. Same thing happens with no passing zones. So I didn't know this was really a thing, but going into it, learning that there were speed limits, you cannot go faster on the downhills, and then no passing zones where they will actually DQ you. And they do take that seriously. I did not see this happen, but I heard from one of the pros that was in the race that one of the pros got disqualified for doing just that. So do take those posted limits seriously. Now, going out of the bike and into the run, notice that I have here legs are shaky. I've never run a half marathon in my life. The longest I had ever run was a solo run at 10 miles. So going into the race, I knew it was a new challenge for me, and I made a decision to walk the uphills. So I was like, you know what? I don't want to burn my legs out. You don't go that much faster if you're running uphill than if you're walking uphill when it's that steep. There's a few sections like on the pier or in some of the neighborhoods where it's pretty steep as you're going uphill. So I thought, you know what? If I'm gonna walk, I'm gonna walk the uphills because I lose the least amount of time in the race. So that enabled me to get recovered, but also to take advantage of the downhills on the other side of that and to make up the time that I had lost in that period of time when I was walking, because unfortunately I did have to walk. Now that leads me into a new point, which was that I walked because my legs buckled, my knees specifically. So at mile 50 on the bike ride, my knees started hurting pretty bad, and I realized I had been relying a lot more on my quads than I was on my hamstrings and glutes. And I had trained hamstrings and glutes, and for whatever reason, I lost that form about halfway through the bike ride, and it started to fatigue. So getting into the run, my knees were already preloaded. They were sore, they were in pain, and I noticed that about mile 5, two things happened. One, my knees buckled, and for the rest of the race, I couldn't get more than a mile of running without my knees just getting me absolute immense pain. And I'd have to stop and stretch and walk for a little while, and then I could get running again. And it was really frustrating because my half marathon time was significantly slower than I knew I could do. And my pace went from, I think like a sub 9-minute pace to a 13-minute pace or 13:40 or something like that. It was bad. So that was a harsh reality to know that I'm fit enough to run faster, but my body was shutting down. My joints, my muscles, both my knees, my foot, felt like I had a bit of a stress fracture recurrence. I had that during my training, and I've now got a blister on my toe that's bigger than my toe itself. And so a number of injuries popped up, and looking at that, I need to figure out what went wrong during the bike segment that put me in a position to kind of be primed for injury. That was unfortunate. Sunscreen is the big one. I watched so many people at the end of the race, because it's a beautiful race day, you're next to the ocean, coming out crisp red, looking like lobsters. And, they're getting sunburnt. It's ridiculous. And thankfully they had sunscreen bins at the transition area from bike to run. And so I said, yeah, lob me up. They put a bunch in their hands and then just slap it on you, and then you lather it as you're running away. And I think that saved me from just getting cooked. That and wearing a hat. So sunscreen, big deal. The crowd's super lively, which is amazing. Tons of fuel options. Like every mile, they've got stations with thousands of grams of carbs in there. So, you got cola, Gatorade, Martin's gels, some kind of fuel brownie bar type thing. And here I am wearing a 9-pound backpack with all the sugar I brought. And I'm like, dang it, I didn't have to bring this on the run. So the bike, I feel the backpack was helpful, but on the run, I might not do that next time, because there was a lot of available snacks. But even with the crowd being lively, the course is 2 laps or 2 loops, and that to me was a little bit defeating, where you get to the end and then you got to do it again. And that was kind of a bummer. But it also served as kind of a mental break to give me an idea of where the halfway points were. So I knew that when I got to the end of the first loop that I was at the halfway mark. So it wasn't this unknown. I knew exactly where I was and how it was going to end. I had already seen the finish line. So it's like, okay, mentally I can map this out. I see where it is now. So in the end, the 2 loops ended up being kind of a benefit for me. Now for me, blood sugars were cruising. Coming out of the swim, blood sugars were a little higher. I had to disconnect my insulin pump and blood sugars. I entered the water at 146 milligrams per deciliter and exited the water at 166, but within 20 minutes, blood sugars had gone up to 196, which is a hyperglycemia, so high blood sugar. I was feeling it. I was nauseous, didn't feel good, and had to make a very calculated decision on how much extra insulin to give so that I would bring it back down into a healthy range to allow me to perform better, but not so much that I would plummet to a hypoglycemia or a low blood sugar, because then your performance drops dramatically and you're a zombie for the rest of the race, right? It's really difficult to recover from that. Now, thankfully I did calculate it correctly, dropped to 130, stayed there for the whole race. But about 5 miles into the run, when the injury started to occur, I also got really full. At that point, I had already consumed about 280 grams of sugar throughout the race. RX bars, Tailwind, Goo, and dates. So that was my mixture. That's what works best for me. And at that mile 5 in the run, I couldn't eat anymore. I was feeling full, kind of nauseous, and so I turned my insulin pump off for about 30 to 45 minutes. And that way I wouldn't have to continue consuming calories at the same rate. I could just sip on them lightly every once in a while. And that worked out great. I stayed between 106 and 111 for the duration of the race and finished at 129, where I stayed stable through the rest of the day. So very happy with the blood sugar outcomes. But getting full, I think that's an important note to mention, is that you have to have backup plans. I've seen a number of race recap videos where people got full and could not keep food down. So I was just uncomfortable, and I could still eat food if I needed to. I've seen race recaps of people who get vomiting and diarrhea that come into the picture, and they cannot keep food down. You need to have different race day plans, and I think that's the biggest lesson that I learned was plan A, B, C. You got to have everything in place. Contingency plans for when things don't go well. For me, it's blood sugars, but also for your fueling source. You know, people all over the place were losing their water bottles. So what do you do if you do lose your water bottle? Got to have those secondary plans. Now, things that I would change. I need to pre-mix my drinks. My hands were shaking wildly. Could not get things in line after the swim. Second, I need a lighter and a tighter backpack. It was bouncing all over. It was 9 pounds. I didn't consume 200 grams of carbs that I had packed. I don't need all of that. Now I know. So lighter and tighter. I need better shoes. I had a number of injuries before the race in my training because I had a very short period of time to train. And the fancy shoes that I bought, I ended up getting a stress fracture in those through overtraining, and my foot could not use those shoes again for some reason. So I ended up using an old pair of tennis shoes that I had that were not fitted. They're not special. They're not for anything this crazy. And they worked, but my feet are kind of jacked up now. And so now I've entered into a delayed recovery phase, which is unfortunate. So better shoes. I need tri-bars. I've used tri-bars or aero bars in the past. Bought a new bike. Freaking love it. It's the Canyon Aero CFS LX8. It's a beautiful bike, but you literally cannot put aero bars on it, not even clip-ons. So now I have to go shop for a new bike because I am planning some longer distances in the near future. I'm not going to talk about that yet because I haven't signed up for it yet, so we'll see. But tri-bars, highly recommend it. I missed using them. My old bike had aero bar clip-ons on, and it made a world of a difference. Injury prevention, I need to spend a lot more time in mobility and functionality to make sure my body can handle things like this and try to identify why my knees shut down during this race. No jewelry. I lost my wedding ring. That sucks. You live and you learn. Proper fit for a wetsuit. Full disclosure, my wetsuit, I'm super tall. I'm 6'6", and a lot of that is in my torso. Wetsuits, even when I get the medium tall versions, just don't fit. It was way too snug in the groin, yanking up on some stuff that shouldn't be yanked on. It made it really uncomfortable, and I was losing feeling. I actually started to go numb in my groin because of that. So I needed to figure out the wetsuit thing and see if there is a way to get a taller, more custom fit for those, which also drags on my shoulder, makes it hard to stroke. So getting things proper fitted. And lastly, proper warm up and showing up earlier in the morning. So I was kind of rushed through getting ready because as I showed up, the shuttles weren't coming anymore, the shuttles to the starting line, and that stressed me out a bit having to get ready super quick. So all in all, really happy with how the race went. Couldn't ask for a better first experience as an Ironman 70.3. And I do recommend the race. It was a blast. Oceanside was beautiful, challenging for sure, but this is a sport that I'm still brand new to, and I can definitely say I'm getting addicted to. So hope you found this video helpful in some capacity, whether you're getting ready for your first or next Ironman or triathlon, or even just getting into any of these individual sports. I hope you follow along, subscribe to the channel. I'll be posting tons of content as a certified master fitness trainer and nutritionist, living with type 1 diabetes, and adventuring through endurance sports. So be sure to hit the subscribe button, drop a comment with any questions, and I'll see you in the next video. Later.